Frieren. Lover of books and shiny trinkets, socially awkward, and short queen. Sound like anyone we know? Okay, she's also got the whole ancient superpowered mage thing going on, but aside from that, I kind of feel like your girl and I have a lot in common. There's very few shows where I know right from episode 1 that I want to cosplay a character, but Frieren is one of them. This show is one that I could watch over and over and over again. It's heartwarming, adventurous, cozy, and relatable. Ticks all the boxes for me. And because Frieren teaches us that time is precious, without further rambling, let's dive right into this costume. I started with a super simple aspect, which was the earrings. I found these really cute brass circle studs on Etsy, along with some resin drop beads. I joined them with a jump ring, and they're basically good to go. Then I spent what felt like a 10-year quest adjusting and draping my mock-up until I got a fit that felt good. Once I was happy with the fit, I was ready to cut out the fabrics. Traditionally, Frieren's outfit is bright white, but I literally stumbled across this off-white crystal satin at Mood Fabrics and fell absolutely in love with it. I also found this gold lame at Mood for the trim. In hindsight, this proved to be a frustrating fabric to work with, but it gives an awesome look. I cut a whole bunch of bias strips for the trims, as well as the tabs for the cuff and collar decoration. To stiffen the tabs, I backed them in 2 layers of plain cotton before stitching all the way around to hold the layers in place. Then I added some gold bias strips. Once the tabs were stitched on 3 sides, I trimmed down the seam allowances, folded the bias tape under to secure the raw edges, and hand stitched it into place. I started with the capelet since that would be the next easiest part to complete. I stitched gold trim along the top edge of the collar, and then, to replicate the black band at the top of the collar, I made my own piping out of a bias cut piece of black fabric from my stash. The gold bias gets folded under, and then the black piping gets added just above. Then I pinned on the lining of the collar and stitched everything in place by hand. Then I stitched together the capelet pieces, both the outer fabric and lining. Before I joined the collar to the capelet, I added on the shoulder tabs. Then I added the lower layer of gold bias and joined the collar to the capelet. The collar seam was sitting a little funky, so I decided to add some twill tape at the join to keep everything sitting nicely. And the capelet gets a hook and bar closure. To make the red beads, I actually used some cufflink bases I had in my stash, cutting off the posts and filing down the rough backs. I broke out my favorite brand of nail polish for the red, painting the underside of the cabochons to give a glistening effect while preventing the polish from chipping. Once the 2 layers of nail polish were fully dry, I joined the cabochons to the bases. And I decided to back the bases with a bit of wool fleece to prevent any fraying of my pretty shiny fabric. The capelet gets a bead at the center front join, which is held in place with a good old E6000. And the shoulder tabs get a bead near the bottom and near the top. Once the beads are firmly in place, I basted the tabs into position. Now it's time to start on the dress. I quickly whipped together the skirt seams since that was the easiest part. Before joining the bodice together, I marked along center front where the black stripes would go using a heat-sensitive pen. Then I added the black stripes by hand with whip stitches and neatened up the edges after it was all stitched up. The lining is the same plain white cotton I used to line the capelet, and it didn't take long to stitch together the bodice pieces of both the lining and outer fabric. With this pattern, you join the front sides to the center front and the back sides to the center back pieces before joining the front and backs together, followed by the shoulders. Then I joined the bodice to the skirt of both the lining and outer fabric, and if anyone tries to tell you it's easy to sew in fake nails, they're lying. I had these on for a Ren Fair for all of 24 hours, and the whole time I was going, how do you function in these? Ren Fair and fake nails done, I got to a slightly nerve-wracking point, the back closure. It's been an age since I did a zipper, and this project called for an invisible zipper. I was secretly hoping there was another way, but then I was watching videos on installing them for reassurance, and decided that if Bernadette Banner could use an invisible zipper for her Moraine Sedai gown, I could use an invisible zipper for Frieren. I did, however, take a page from Bernadette and sewed this thing in place entirely by hand. And it wasn't as scary as I thought. Once installed, I could sew up the last little bit of the skirt by machine. And then we have the sleeves. This was the part of the pattern that was the most confusing, and I did end up deviating from the instructions somewhat and doing my own thing, but here we go. I started by attaching the cuff base to the main sleeve piece. Then I added the first bit of gold trim by machine and finished off the underside by hand. This is where things got really complicated, and I really had to pay attention to which pieces were facing which way, and which way the right side and wrong side of the fabrics had to sit. The sleeve tab got sandwiched between the cuff and the sleeve, and then the gold part of the cuff got stitched down. And this is what all that wonky sandwiching ends up looking like. A gold bar of trim on top, a nice wide gold cuff, and a sleeve tab with all its raw edges enclosed perfectly. Then I finished off the raw edge of the wide gold trim, and yes, I am using gold embroidery thread here. I seem to be determined to use the most finicky materials for this project. I basted the sleeve tab down before sewing up the sleeve, as it is much easier to do so when they're flat versus a tube. And unlike the shoulder tabs, I basted all the way along these tabs to make sure they sat nice and flat. With the details done, the sleeves can get sewn up. I did a quick gathering stitch along the sleeve head, and then slowly and carefully joined them to their bodice pieces. The collar edges got turned down, pinned together, and stitched by hand. The pattern recommends bag lining, aka put the right sides together, sew it down by machine, and then flip it right side out, but I much prefer the control and effect that I get sewing a hem by hand. I also folded under the lining of the sleeves and joined it to the outer fabric. The hem gets leveled off, and then I did a quick turned and top stitched hem on both layers separately. I added my gold double width bias tape to the skirt hem, and once again stitched it down by hand. For the lower line of stitches, I used a yellow thread that blends in fairly well, and I made a point of keeping my stitches as invisible as possible. For the upper edge, I went back to the gold thread and whip stitched all the way around. And of course, Frieren wouldn't be Frieren without her iconic staff. It's been a while since I've made a proper prop for a cosplay, and well over a decade since I've made anything staff related, but I really wanted to grow my skills with this project. Plus, if I'm spending the money on a prop anyway, I'd much rather buy the components and make it myself than buy a cheaply made fast fashion version of the prop from, like, Amazon. Plus, making it entirely myself means I can guarantee it'll pass the prop inspection at conventions. So to start, I sketched out a mock-up and then cut the main pieces out of 4mm EVA foam. The center circle gets 2 layers since we'll be adding the jewel later, while the crescent gets 4 layers. For 2 layers of the crescent, I also cut out places for the center dowels to fit in. I also cut a whole bunch of thin strips of 1mm foam for the details. For the jewel, I decided to go with clear Warbler, which will be spray painted on the inside a little later on. Heading outside for ventilation, I used contact cement to join the 2 circles and the 4 layers of crescent together. This stuff is pungent, and I made sure to also wear a mask to protect my lungs from nasty fumes. Once the contact cement has sat for 15 minutes, the pieces can be matched up. This is a one and done, better not mess up process, as once the 2 sides of contact cement meet, they are, well, cemented. I did a little bit of preemptive carving down of the edges, just to round them somewhat and make the next step a little easier. The next step is to Dremel the edges, smoothing things down and making all the pieces even. And since I was doing this in the middle of a heat wave, this is literally the only clip I got before my camera overheated and had to go sit in the shade to cool down. Once done, it looks something like this. I cut some dowel to hold the center piece and used E6000 to hold them in place. To help smooth things out even further and to fill in a couple of little gaps, I decided to give foam clay a try. This is such a weird texture, but it works fantastically with EVA foam. You can pack it into little holes, smoosh it along ridges, and add volume and texture. And since it's the same material as EVA foam, you don't need to glue it on. I also used it to make the little point at the top of the staff. I made a flat little circle and then a little cone to go on top. For the staff handle, I used PVC pipe as it's lightweight and con-friendly. I cut it down to roughly 4.5 feet, which will make my finished staff just over 5 feet. I gave the topper a light sanding to smooth down the dried foam clay and cut out a small circle for the staff handle to fit. Then I joined the top point and the handle, again using contact cement. For the bottom finial, I made a little circle and a rectangle out of the 1mm foam. The finial gets a little bit of detail trim, which again is just the 1mm foam. Then the handle can get joined to the topper, and I realized then that I hadn't quite cut out enough, so I had to do some on-the-fly planning. Once I was happy with my topper fix, I added the little strips for detailing. I was worried my fix would look really janky, but it actually kind of works with the original design fairly well. Then I used just a touch from the heat gun to seal the foam. And since I already had the heat gun out, it was the perfect time to shape the Warbler for the jewel. This is my first time working with Warbler, so there was a little bit of trial and error, but overall I like the subtle curvature I got. Before the staff can get painted, the foam needs to be primed. I used some spray Plasti-Dip, again another product I am using for the very first time. Yes, I had fresh air, and yes, I was wearing proper PPE on my face. Don't at me for my Hobbit-style footwear. 3 coats of Plasti-Dip later, it was time to paint. Since I already had the gold pieces taped off, I started with them. Then I blocked off the gold pieces and painted the handle. And I used the same red to paint the inside of the Warbler pieces. With the staff all painted, I could glue the center jewels in place on either side. And to finish things off, I used some red ribbon from my stash for the wrapping around the lower part of the crescent. And finally, it is time for a quest. It's done. I love it. Frieren is such a sweet character, and I loved getting to bring her to life. This was definitely a challenging project, and there were quite a few moments where I had to remind myself to trust the process. But overall, I am so happy with how it turned out. I don't know if the camera fully picks up on just how epic this fabric is, but the moment I saw it in the shop, all I could think of was episode 10, where you finally get to see Frieren's mana and just how powerful she is. Like, I love that moment. Goosebumps. And this fabric is that vibe. It's mild-mannered from a distance, but if you pay attention, it shimmers and waves in an ethereal sort of way, and my first thought was, it's mana fabric. It is meant to be. The lame, on the other hand, if I was doing this costume over, I would definitely use something different, as it was a right pain in the tuchus to work with. So finicky, it wanted to fray like crazy, and you have to use a super low heat when ironing, or it will bubble and shrink up and just become unusable. But again, overall, I think it turned out pretty sweet. The earrings have also become part of my regular wardrobe. I love that they're subtle enough to just be a pair of earrings, but for those that know the reference, it's a little bit of geekery in otherwise non-geeky outfits. Now, is the staff perfect? Not quite. There are a few flaws and wonky bits, but considering it was my first time ever working with thicker EVA foam, contact cement, Plasti-Dip, and Warbla, I like how it turned out. There are definitely lessons I learned and places of improvement that I will take into the future if I ever decide to remake it, but for now, I have an awesome Frieren staff. It looks so cool. And in the name of cosplay, it does pass the 5-foot rule. That is, it looks accurate from the perspective of someone looking at it from a 5-foot distance. So I will consider that a win. This was quite an intense project, and I am more than ready for something a little easier. I'm currently working on 2 hand sewing projects, one of which I'm hoping to have out in just a couple weeks, so if you'd like to see what I make next, please consider subscribing. And we're also getting real close to 10,000 subscribers, so if you want to help hit that milestone, hit subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and if you'd like to support the channel, I do have a Ko-fi page, and I will see you soon for more geekery meets history sewing adventures. Shall we go then? Lover of books and shine... What? You don't like Frieren? Are you grouchy? You grouchy because of the rain? Love getting to... What are we doing? I don't know what we're doing. Oh, my brain is all over the place. But the moment I saw it... Oh yeah. 12 o'clock in a small town. Can y'all hear the test siren? Okay, go, filming.